Hello, everyone. Welcome to this session sponsored by EyeSee, the world's fastest growing behavioral research firm. You should know we were recently awarded Quirk's Marketing Research Agency of the Year award. Thank you for joining us. We all know that just a little while ago, Joe Biden was sworn in as president. And we also know that in the days from Election Day to today's inauguration have been unusually fraught with heightened levels of concern, frustration, and commentary from all sides. Beyond that, the implications of the COVID pandemic continue to grab our attention in terms of infection rates, hospital capacity, economic impact, and thankfully, the implementation of vaccines. And of course, societal issues such as racial and gender equality continue to be of great concern to many people. All of this plays out 24/7 on all forms of social media, and brand owners must determine if they should participate in these conversations, possibly alienating some of their target, and if they do, and alternatively, being judged harshly by some if they don't participate. Beyond choosing which, if any, issues they should be vocal about, they must also determine just how to proceed so as to be seen as sensitive, thoughtful, and appropriate. Today's session is intended to help navigate these choppy waters at this challenging time. Based on the considerable experience we've had evaluating social media for various clients, I'd like to introduce my colleagues who are experts in behavioral research and will be sharing these insights. First, Maria Smuja, Advertising Insights Director.
Hi there.
And Olivier, our founder and CEO.
Hi.
So Olivier, as businesses struggle to recoup lost sales in the wake of the pandemic and or deal with new consumer needs and experience or increased opportunities, marketers are turning to social media to meet two equally urgent imperatives: delivering short-term ROI with targeted tactical offers, and also to create meaningful digital experiences that will build brand equity and foster long-term loyalty. With so much turmoil these days, is it wise for advertisers to address these issues on their social media platforms?
Well, last 3-4 years, even pre-COVID, marketing directors, brand VPs, they were speaking about purpose for their brand. Now, if you take a step back now, as Jonathan mentioned, you have two major issues: COVID and the political social divisions. Both are linked actually with behavioral change and attitudes. If you look at COVID, more than 300,000 people died in the United States of COVID. That's more than in the Second World War. And okay, now you have vaccinations, you have rapid testing, and so forth. But with behavioral change, so wearing masks, social distancing, and washing your hands frequently, that number might have been lower. Secondly, you have political and social division. It's simple. Rights don't create value, but destroy value. For every percentage decrease in GDP of United States, about 15 to 60,000 more people die. That can be homeless, that can be malnutrition, etc. Homeless in the United States is skyrocketing, while stock exchange is high. Division is not good. It's not about Democrats versus Republicans. It's not about United States versus China, but it's now with all these issues, we should work together. Working together is about attitudes. So as mentioned before, it's about behavioral change and attitudes. And there is one big industry that's actually all about that. It's advertising. Brands spend more than $350 billion a year in the United States of changing people's behavior, changing people's attitude. What if they can take a small part of that and try to accomplish both return on investment on advertising, but as well create a big social impacts for the society? To be honest, this is not completely new. In 2000s or early 2000s, many companies spent quite a lot of money on CSR. Next couple of 5 years, it was about greenhouse gases. Like Microsoft, more than 40% of their energy comes from solar or wind wind turbines. You have the issue of LGBT, you have Black Lives Matters, and so forth. The question nowadays is, how far do you want to go as a brand? There is so much division on political and then social sides. Do you want to go into that or not? That's fine if you don't want to go to that, but then pick some other battles and do it in a type of authentic way. For instance, food manufacturers can focus on homeless people, can focus on people that just lost their job, etc.
In the past, brands have tried to strike a neutral tone, trying to avoid offending anyone or alienating certain groups of people. But these days, with so many LGBTQ campaigns, the Me Too movement, the Black Lives Matter protests, things have shifted, and it seems as if the risk of backlash for not taking a stand might be a bigger concern. Do you have any thoughts about that?
Clearly, everybody recalls the ad campaign of Pepsi and Candle. That was a backlash, but there are opportunity costs of not taking stands at the moment. For instance, Facebook is losing employees because of their neutral position. For me, it's all about learning. If brands are convinced about their purpose, they will need to learn. One of the best ways to learn is actually by experimentation and by doing research. You try something out in a controlled environment, you measure it, learn from it, try out something new, learn from it, and then release it. And for me, that's what research is about.
Well, I agree. For researchers and marketers now, facing so many new decisions in unprecedented times, it is even more relevant to test your claims and ideas and not to go on assumptions. The key questions when tackling social and other issues are: is a certain cause or topic a good brand fit for you? And the other one is: how does it work for your specific target group? Newly emerged methods such as testing in full replicas of social media feeds really help us effectively remove our biases from the decision-making process. Actually, this minimizes the risk of making the wrong move and allows brands to focus on building meaningful connections. In time of crisis, we might expect that consumers are overwhelmed with so many messages and that they would be strictly focused on crisis-related information, and thus being less receptive to advertising. But actually, we thought that the ads will lose the race for consumers' attention compared to the hot political or COVID-19 related news. But we were wrong. 2/3 of consumers actually claimed that they are even more attentive to what brands have to say. Around 90% of consumers appreciate when brands respond to the crisis, especially if that response is focused on their well-being rather than on the product's functional features or benefits. And brands just cannot stay tone deaf to that.
Well, that's really interesting. And I have always said that research is a very humbling experience because we cannot usually guess at what our target shoppers will think and do. And in these instances, it's particularly important to get out of our own bubbles. And speaking of tone deaf, we've recently seen social media companies have been enforcing their rules and regulations for what is allowable to post. And even those actions have created some backlash. We've also seen that for some time, there have been many people calling for the breakup of these colossal companies, fearing that they're becoming too powerful. What do those factors suggest for marketers?
Well, people used to use social media to stay connected and be entertained. Now it's become primary source of news for people. In addition, you can even buy products directly via social media platforms. Let's mention like Google Shop Loop, the TikTok and Spotify, Snapchat and Amazon integrated features, Facebook and Instagram's online shops are created. All Facebook's messaging apps are on the way to be merged. Instagram just introduced Reels and Twitter is working on its version of Stories. These are only some from out of a long list of new options to leverage. For brands, testing all these developing features in a traditional way is not really an option. So we need the real-time and online in-context studies. Those studies really got a huge boost. Replicated feeds allow for quick, real-time insights and ultimately better understanding of how consumers behave, because you are mapping their behavior in the actual environment.
Well, that's certainly a lot to consider when doing testing. And Maria, I know your team has been leveraging replicated environments, virtual stores, and social media feeds in many studies over the past few months. What have you seen in terms of behavior shifting? Do consumers expect brands to take a stand on these issues?
Well, yes, according to a large Twitter study, a strong majority of 65% does expect culturally relevant ads. Well, in this study, we tested the role of gender in sports ad on a replicated Twitter feed among 2,400 respondents. And counter to the conventional assumptions, we found that ads starring female athletes outperformed campaigns with male athletes on many advertising KPIs. Actually, ads with sportswomen labeled as non-traditional managed to elect higher emotional response compared to the traditional ones. On the other side, male athletes in non-traditional roles triggered lower emotional engagement and didn't particularly stand out in terms of driving interest about a brand or improving viewers' opinion about it. So, gender role topic is important, and actually it's on brands to address it in a right and incredible way.
Maria, I'm sorry to interrupt, but is that the study that won the Quirks Award for Best Advertising Study?
Yes, you're right.
That is such an important study. Let's get a quick reminder of the key takeaways.
One very interesting finding is that ads featuring females in sports activities contradict stereotypes by default. Female athletes are seen as strong, skillful, persistent, even when the emphasis is on their gracefulness and elegance. Sports are obviously still perceived as a field ground dominated and ruled by men, so regardless of the way they are portrayed, women in sports defy stereotypes. And these ads are also seen as more empowering and more memorable compared to those with male athletes as main protagonists. Now, regardless of protagonist's gender, ads with non-traditional roles make greater impact on shopping behavior compared to control group. And we also noticed that ads with male athletes had higher effect on shopping behavior of female viewers, while ads with sportswomen had greater impact on shopping of male audience compared to control group. And this is in line with some of our internal studies that show that purchase intent goes stronger when viewer and protagonist are of opposite gender. We were also interested in finding out why ads with male athletes, presented in both traditional and non-traditional roles, fall flat when it comes to credibility and sense of empowerment. And our hypothesis is that roles given to male athletes slide between energized and sometimes goofy men of action, those are the traditional ones, and athletes who bravely embark on atypical activities bordering on extreme. And none of these polarities is seen as plausible or convincing, implying that men in the audience are still looking for more relatable role models to feel empowered. Successful alpha males are just one predominant polarity, and that obviously is no longer enough. So one question remains: where is that balance with whom male viewers can relate?
Okay, back to you, Maria. What else has your team uncovered?
On the other hand, in one of the largest mobile behavior studies we did on Instagram, We found that responding to the Black Lives Matter or COVID-19 crisis will improve brand perception. And this especially stands for industries where long-term relationships and loyalty-building business models are key. This is especially true for financial services and strong FMCG brands.
Let's dig in a bit deeper. What should brands in different industries be aware of?
When it comes to the beauty industry, beauty industry stays close to their benchmark both in Black Lives Matter and COVID-19 crisis. But pharma industry performed poorly. These results are possibly caused by the fact that pharma companies have a specific audience that should be wisely targeted. When it comes to media, they also had, let's say, really poor results, possibly due to a lack of trust, because they stood out only in supporting posts, because the content like LGBT rights, those posts were relevant to their audiences. So I would once again say relevance is key for engagement. Always think about how the content is relevant to your customers, to your consumers, and not just to your brand. We also saw that brand purchase is driven more strongly if the respondents and the protagonists of the ad are of the same race. So this is also something to just keep in mind when it comes to creative elements.
Well, that's a lot to take in. So let's summarize. What is the biggest takeaway from the Instagram study?
Well, the biggest takeaway here is that Black Lives Matter and COVID-19 posts tend to be more impactful than more generic emotional posts or just CSR posts. Of course, when done right.
Yes, and that's such an important point. How brands frame their messaging really matters.
True, a huge portion of the Instagram study tried to different messaging and how they impact likability and memorability. Honest messaging evokes positive emotions and thumbs down for generic messages. Why? Because brands need to be opinionated, but in a meaningful and respectful way. For example, brands responding to the COVID-19 crisis should call for staying at home or should promote real COVID-19 heroes. And facial coding actually uncovers what is the emotional impact of each tested post. Things connected with positive emotions are sincere and warm messaging, witty copy and images, footage of animals, depiction of sport and activities. And most notably, talking about relevant topics and communicating that the brand stands against discrimination and racism and contributes to the cause in a specific way. Showing a variety of ethnic backgrounds and cultural diversity is what is really important. We also saw the brand purchase is driven more strongly if the respondents and the protagonists of the ad are of the same ethnic background. This helps consumers to identify with the brand's values and to take brand communications relevant. On the other hand, what causes negative emotions is unclear messaging, especially when the message is unrelated to the image. Generic images, very long descriptions, and text-heavy posts with a lot of hashtags evoke similar negative feels. Furthermore, the current social context must be taken in consideration. For example, if the brand launches posts with a tactical offer during the crisis, like giveaways with extremely big prizes, respondents find it harder to believe that they will win and makes this post less relevant to them. For example, during the pandemic, ads or giveaways for discounts or some easily accessible rewards drive more engagement than lavish presents. Anyhow, you just need to understand your target audience needs and values in order to build a long-lasting relationship with them.
Your comment about messaging is really interesting because you can go even one level lower. If you look at stats, a little bit depending of country, but only between 40 to 60% of people is considering to vaccinate. at the moment is we are doing an internal study, or we are financing a study to understand what is the best messaging for COVID vaccination, because you can go many ways. So on the one hand, you can try to be aspirational. If you get vaccinated, you can travel again. On the other hand, you can try out a card of social pressure. For instance, President Obama or Mike Pence got vaccinated. What about you? Or even like 50% of people are considering to be vaccinated. What about you? Another thing could be more emotional. You have a great campaign about hug me, I'm vaccinated. So many messages that you still can put out there. So even testing on that level might be interesting.
Well, we've covered a lot of ground here, but I know we just scratched the surface of what these studies revealed. There's so much we can learn, so many actionable insights that come from this kind of behavioral tracking as it's happening, and so much we can apply to what people do.
For example,
So think about meaningful ways to address the crisis in a less generic way, more humble, more human, and also let's make it more relatable to your audience. Emotional images can often be less personally relevant due to the use of generic photos, also motivational quotes, etc. On the other hand, seasonal and tactical posts perform the worst in terms of emotions. They're less innovative and the type of brand content that is most commonly encountered on social media. But when it comes to tactical and seasonal offers, these type of posts are, let's say, the easiest to understand, and tactical offers have a long retention power, such as posts explaining the rules of a giveaway or, for example, a course of action that needs to take place.
Now, as our session is coming to a close, what final words of wisdom can each of you share with our audience?
I can say that many marketing professionals think that positioning and visibility is the key for getting noticed. But in fact, getting the link between brand and content is the most important. The key factor in ad retention is personal relevance. Brands can do this either by talking about relevant topics and showing they care for their consumers, or through different offers and posts that directly concern the consumer in terms of the product or service displayed. Posts that do neither of those perform poorly, and they're just glanced through and consequently not remembered.
I completely agree with you, Maria, but from another point of view, is for many brands, this will be a huge leap forward. What's important for them is quick learning and use experimentation, and that's really important for their brands so that they don't make any mistakes. And that's where market research actually can play a significant part in. So a little bit to conclude, what's important for sure is clarity, likability. Those things lead to purchase, because if you don't feel good about a brand, you will not buy it. But on the other hand, you can still spin messaging and understand what works best. Is it rational messaging, emotional messaging, social messaging, and so forth? That might be interesting to try out for your brand.
Well, thank you, Olivier and Maria, for sharing all these great insights and thinking about these issues. And thanks to our audience for attending. Remember, we will be making a recording available of the entire session. And be on the lookout for upcoming webinars that we're going to have with some of these technology companies that we've been talking about. We've just barely begun to scratch the surface on these issues, and there's so much more to learn and talk about.